A step toward real reform, or is the PA buying time? The Palestinian Authority's prime minister and the government have resigned, but remain as caretakers, with President Mahmoud Abbas still in command. As Hamas and the PA meet in Moscow to discuss a united Palestine government, we'll ask who truly represents the Palestinian people. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority in Ramallah hasn't held elections for 18 years. In all that time, it's been led by its now 88-year-old president, Mahmoud Abbas. Now, polls show the PA is perceived as corrupt and is deeply unpopular with the Palestinian people. But now, with the U.S. pushing for the PA to play a leading role in post-war Gaza, it's being forced to reform. The resignation of the government led by Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh seems to be a first step, but many are asking if it will actually lead to real change and whether a united government for all Palestine can be agreed.
With Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh stepping down, Palestine enters a new era of uncertainty.
This decision comes as a result of the political, security and economic developments from the offensive on our people in Gaza and the unprecedented escalation in the West Bank and Jerusalem.
While the resignation may alter the political landscape, it's unlikely to improve the authority's standing amongst ordinary Palestinians.
Nothing good happened under the previous government. On the contrary, there was a decline in everything, and this is a normal result when a government does not reflect the national consensus.
Shtayyeh's departure is seen as a response to the deadlock in peace talks and the ongoing Israeli assault on Gaza. A shift towards a technocratic government is now expected, but still under the shadow of international pressure, particularly from the United States. Washington supports a reformed Palestinian Authority, holding power in both the West Bank and Gaza once the war is over.
Whether the government changes or not, it is appointed by American and occupation Israeli decisions. The people representing it do not mean anything. They change faces, but in essence, it is the Oslo Accord government. It is the security coordination with Israel's government, and the American government too. Therefore, it is appointed based on the will of the Americans and not according to what is happening on the ground and the Palestinian need.
The PA, based in Ramallah and led by the Fatah group, grapples with limited governing powers in the West Bank and none in Gaza, which has been under Hamas rule since 2007. Unlike Hamas, the PA recognizes the state of Israel and wants a two-state solution. But it's not held presidential elections since the incumbent Mahmoud Abbas was elected in 2005 and no parliamentary elections since 2006. Recent months have seen a flurry of US diplomatic activity with the Palestinian leaders in Ramallah, with the aim of bolstering the PA's legitimacy ahead of a potential leadership role when the conflict ends in Gaza. With the region standing on the brink of significant political change, the world is watching closely. The departure of Prime Minister Shtayyeh may open new avenues for dialogue or deepen existing divides.
So, could this resignation open the door to more effective leadership or sow greater accord? Well, let's get some perspective now from the Palestinian Authority itself. And joining me from Ramallah is Sabri Saidam. He is Deputy Secretary General of the Fatah Central Committee. Thanks so much for being with us. First, tell us why your government has resigned. Was it purely due to U.S. pressure?
Well, that's a good question. I am here representing Fatah, my political party. I think you ought to have interviewed somebody from the Palestinian Authority, but nevertheless...
Fatah is the main faction of the Palestinian Authority, though. You're the dominant party by far.
Thanks for explaining. Just to clarify, indeed, there's been some change of government because there's been a consensus amongst all Palestinian ranks that we should pave the way for establishing a Palestinian consensus government together with other Palestinian factions. So we would see this as an opportunity. Had this been subject to American pressure, Americans wouldn't have wanted to see Hamas but we have decided to speak to everyone and include Hamas in the new fabric of the Palestinian government, as it were. It may not be represented, since this is not going to be a partisan-based government, but it has to give the blessing for a strategy forward. So I would say this is an opportunity, and we should look at it this way.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the talks that are getting underway with Hamas. But I mean, it sounds dramatic to have a prime minister resign to clear the way for a new government. But right now, nothing has changed. The same people are still in charge. President Abbas is still there. And the PA will be engaging in these talks with Hamas in Moscow to look at forming this united Palestinian government. So is the PA really changing?
I would say, you are playing into the music of what the Americans and Israelis have been advocating for the last few weeks. Not you personally, but rather, the sort of questions that you're asking in a way that are creating the feeling that the Palestinian Authority ought to be transformed. What we are saying is that there is a change of government on the way to achieving political consensus, on the way to establishing a political strategy that is accepted by all parties, and on the way that the Palestinian government, according to constitution, would need some time for it to be formed. So by the time we finish these talks, this war hopefully would have ended, and we would have to face the music, face the destruction that's in Gaza, face the reality, as it were, and the challenges that Netanyahu is imposing upon us all. So let's look at the positive side and hope for the best for the Palestinians.
But I mean, shouldn't the Palestinian Authority be reformed? You have polls among Palestinians saying that 90% of Palestinians want your president, Mahmoud Abbas, to resign. And if he doesn't, nothing will change, and people will be as dissatisfied as ever with their PA leadership. Start with Mahmoud Abbas. Why won't he let go?
My dear, we are in the middle of a war. The polls that are referred to, especially in the media now, are polls that have been conducted by an institution that is American funded. So is this an American scenario that's being designed for us? Every time there is a war, we are told that we ought to change our leadership and that Palestinians ought to be doing 1, 2, 3. So we are always treated as the underdogs, as the ones who don't know how to even breathe or live.
I agree with part of what you've said, but I do have very close Palestinian contacts who are just average Palestinians, as we could describe them, that will say the same thing as these polls are saying about the PA leadership. I mean, they've had the same president now for almost 19 years, and it's not gotten better. Go ahead.
If you allow me to finish, I'm more than happy to answer all your questions. Transformation wouldn't happen when war is happening. When there is Palestinian consensus, amongst this consensus, we will advocate for new elections. These elections would have to reactivate the Palestinian Legislative Council and will include presidential elections. So certainly we'll move in the direction of elections. But if you ask the people in Palestine right now, especially the people in Gaza, their priority is going to be fixated on the reconstruction of Gaza, on the restoration of normal life, so to sabotage Netanyahu's plans for displacement. So I would say, yes, the political scene and the political structure ought to be transformed in a way that is conducive to the need of the Palestinian people and win the consensus that is needed by all political parties. Moreover, I would say, the word comes and talks to us about reform, which is something that's customary. As I said, it happened 2002 when Arafat was around. Forgetting that, Netanyahu on his right and on his left, there is at least 10 ministers who have criminal records, and nobody talks to Netanyahu about reform, despite the extremism. So I would say, to be fair and square, this issue is a Palestinian internal issue. It has to be addressed, certainly. And when we talk about the positiveness of consensus, we're certainly paving the way for a different future.
And I agree with you 100% that it is a Palestinian issue and it should be decided by Palestinians. But then what do you say to those Palestinians who've always argued that the PA is actually nothing more than a Bantustan government who has, they feel, sold out its people and helped almost enable Israeli occupation because it keeps the PA in power?
Well, my dear, if you look at the way Israel is targeting us all, it's not differentiating between anybody. The rhetoric that is taking shape and is being propagated is to do with further weakening the Palestinian narrative and weakening the Palestinian structure. Israel is killing Hamas and Fatah and killing all people of different walks of lives, regardless of their beliefs or political affiliation. It's targeting the Palestinian identity. So I would say, we Palestinians collectively ought to close the door on this by achieving number one consensus, by achieving homogeneity amongst the parties, by planning for a better future, by conducting elections, and things should happen. But I cannot say, to a president whose picture is depicted everywhere around Israeli settlements with a headband showing Hamas headband whilst he's the leader of Fatah. And Netanyahu talks about Hamasistan and Fathistan, and 40% to 50% those killed in Gaza of our own party loyalists, to come and say that you have been the puppets of Israel or you've been advocating. This Oslo agreement was signed with the consensus of everyone. And I say in 1988, when we held the Palestinian National Council, all parties were there. Okay. Moreover, if you allow me, just one sentence, is that the majority of political parties have benefited from the Oslo agreement. Come now and say, we are not approving of Oslo is not right. Even Hamas ruled Palestine in 2007 under the auspices of a government that was formed on the basis of Oslo. So I would say, let's get the record straight and work for the best of Palestine to come, inshallah.
Okay, Sabri Saidam, thank you really so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. We greatly appreciate your insight. Let's broaden out the discussion now, and joining me from Copenhagen is Palestinian ambassador to Denmark, Manuel Hassassian. From Rome is Ramzy Baroud. He's an author and the editor of the Palestine Chronicle. And from Tel Aviv, author and columnist for Haaretz newspaper, Gideon Levy. Thanks all so much for being with me. Ramzy, let me start with you. You heard the interview with Sabri Saidam there. He's talking about the PA wanting a consensus government now with Hamas, and that's what this reform is all about, these resignations. Do you believe them? Are they sincere? And is there still a place for the PA in leadership going forward?
Not at all. I do not believe a word. And it's kind of quite alarming, actually, to feel that at this point into this genocide in Gaza, where we have experienced something collectively that we have never experienced before. Not even the first Nakba is compared to this ongoing Nakba. And to feel that the Palestinian political discourse, or the official Palestinian Authority so-called leadership discourse, has not evolved to the point of actually trying to match the intensity of this horrific moment. Quite worrying, which really means that this entire thing is a political spectacle, is a charade that is really aimed at checking boxes, pleasing the Americans, the Europeans, and others, to show them that the PA is doing something, meeting the expectations as far as supposedly coveted reforms are concerned. But they have nothing to do with trying to achieve reconciliation. There is no apology. Saidam should be apologizing right now. Mahmoud Abbas should get down on his knees and apologize to the Palestinian people for crushing the resistance in the West Bank while the Palestinians are dying in Gaza. No apology.
If they did that, would they be forgiven? Would you allow them to continue then, if there were an apology, for example?
It depends on the degree of seriousness of how, like, is the project still a Palestinian Authority project, or is it still a representative Palestinian leadership that is trying to meet the expectations of a national liberation movement in Palestine and outside Palestine? They haven't matured to that point. I have my serious doubts whether they will ever be able to meet that kind of expectations.
Ambassador, do you think the PA should be apologizing?
We don't have to mix apples with oranges here. It's not a matter of apology. First of all, we have to understand that there is a difference between the PA and the PLO. The PLO embarked on a negotiating process with Israel and produce something called the Oslo peace process, which all factions have conceded to and accepted it as a strategy for the formation of an independent Palestinian state. The PA came as a result of the elections, legislative, presidential, and part of this Oslo agreement to take care of the civil infrastructure, to take care of health, education, and what have you. So when we talk about political entity, the political entity is the PLO, which is comprising of all political factions except Hamas. Now, when we talk in the process about, reforming or having a kind of a new government, yes, every state, passes through a certain period of time, and it is high time now to change this government and try to infuse more energetic youth, new ideas into the process of national reconstruction, mental health reconstruction, because the challenges that Israel had made us encounter, they're so steep. And to come over these hurdles by just rhetorical saying being apologetic or leaving I mean, where do we go from here? The first thing that we should do is basically have a consensus, that's true, have a national accord government, because we'll never have a consensus per se. Hamas, we don't know whether they will accept the charter of the PLO and to stop this and that, but a national accord government will be a prelude, a stepping stone towards understanding the magnanimity of what happened to the people in Gaza, and to go accordingly with the international community that wants a two-state solution, and they want a partner that could negotiate with Israel the future perspectives when the dust settles in Gaza. So if we talk about the PA now to go, are we creating a political vacuum? Then
Okay.
who is going to represent the Palestinian people? You let me know. Who's
Okay.
going to shoulder the responsibility of the
Yeah, that is the big
construction in
question.
Gaza and what have you?
And I'd like to ask Ramzy about that in just a second, but I'd first like to get to Gideon, because Gideon, would Israel even accept or welcome, I should say, would they welcome reforms in the PA to the point that they would see a newly formed PA as a kind of negotiating partner here? And if this consensus government is formed with Hamas, where would that leave Israel?
I suggest to all of us to ignore the current Israel, because the current Israel is not interested in any kind of settlement, not with Hamas, and not with the PA, and it's really not on the table. We should look at the world now, because after many years of total international apathy for the fate of the Palestinians, there is now a very interesting and meaningful momentum in the world to try to solve the Palestinian problem once and for all. And this momentum shouldn't be missed. Israel cannot be part of it because Israel doesn't want any kind of settlement, never did it want. I claim that Israel was never ready for a two-state solution or any other solution. Israel was always ready for containing the occupation, for continuing it, for making it easier, but nothing more than this. So therefore, we shouldn't miss the hour, and I'm afraid the Palestinians are going to miss the hour, because what the world wants now is an effective leadership, no matter which one, but an effective leadership, and we shouldn't get the approval of Israel, and the Palestinians don't need the approval of Israel. Which government Israel will like more? Israel has no good intention in this story.
I get that, and it sounds ideal, and I think that's what everyone would really want. But unfortunately, we have what we have, and the Israeli government that is in power right now is in power right now, and they're not going anywhere, because let's be honest, Netanyahu is going to hold on for dear life for the foreseeable future. So Ramzy, I mean, let me come back to you, because this reform we're talking about in the PA, is it because of outside pressure from the US, Arab states, even from Israel? And if it is, might it just be a good thing, even if for the wrong reasons?
Absolutely, but reforms for what? I mean, what is the point of reforming and something that is utterly corrupt to begin with, without changing the fundamental structure of that institution? Ambassador Hassassian is talking about mixing apples and oranges. who mixed the apples and oranges in the first place. When Mahmoud Abbas brought few of his corrupt elites, gave them superficial titles, they have no real authority, and imposed the PA on the PLO, marginalized the PLO, gave all the powers of that PA to various branches of the Fatah movement. Basically, Mahmoud Abbas is everything. He allocates power, he allocates lives and death, he allocates salaries, he allocates everything. And as a result, there is this massive corruption within the Palestinian leadership that it really cannot be reformed. But again, reforms for the sake of Israel, so that Benjamin Netanyahu may say, okay, this is a Palestinian leadership I am willing to work with once I am done with my genocide in Gaza, or reforms for the sake of the Palestinian people. But if it is for the Palestinian people, then it's not the PA that needs to reforms. We shouldn't care too much about the PA. It's the PLO that needs to be reformed. And yes, Ambassador Hassassian, if you follow the news, Hamas and the other factions, including the Islamic Jihad, had agreed in principle to the charter of the PLO. The disagreement is over allocating of seats and how do you actually represent the various factional branches of Palestinian society. And they got very, very close to that point. But every single time Washington comes in with the money, if Hamas is in, money is out. And Mahmoud Abbas, every single time he backed down.
Ramzy, very quickly, though, we've been hearing about these reforms, meaning that somehow a new technocratic government could take hold out of Ramallah. But then you have to ask, and the ambassador asked the same question, who's there? Who's waiting in the wings to take power, to take the new lead, if you don't have Mahmoud Abbas, if you don't have Fatah? Who's there?
That's the masterful illusions that has been created by Oslo, that Palestinians are actually an independent people with a government. We are an occupied people according to the Fourth Geneva Convention. The responsibilities of managing occupied areas should fall on the occupying power, and that is Israel, according to a very clear norms and rules that should be imposed on Israel. In fact, this is what they are talking about at the ICJ now as we speak. This is what it's all about. But we continue to speak of sovereignty and leadership and government and ministers and red carpets wherever they go. But at the end of the day, there is no authority whatsoever. They are managing electric bills and municipalities and that sort of thing, which really should be the responsibility of Israel in the first place.
Okay, Ambassador, go ahead.
Yeah, Ramzy Baroud, listen, my friend. It is easy just to criticize and not coming up with options that are concrete options. How many times President Abbas wanted to have elections and it was obstructed by Israel? How many times have we resorted to have legislative and presidential elections and it was obstructed by Israel? Now, when you talk about reforms, you talk about elections, because elections will produce new candidates, new ideas, and what have you.
I'm not talking about reforms, Ambassador Hassassian. I did not speak about reforms. I'm talking about a new Palestinian leadership within the PLO infrastructure, not within the PA.
Listen, Hamas has always rejected to be part and parcel of the PLO. Now Hamas started tuning to a rhetoric, because it is really in a very critical position today, during this war. And what will happen after this war, we don't know what's gonna happen to Hamas. Are they going to still run Gaza or not? So one way to legitimize Hamas is to accept the quartet, 4 conditions, to become part of the PLO, because that's the only organization that could really be accepted, legitimized by Israel, whether this government, a future government, because we know Oslo has done nothing except brought us calamities. I do agree with that, but at least Israel and its society has claimed now and acclaimed and acknowledged the national identity of a Palestinian people, which means that the Palestinian people are a people to reckon with, and they
are destroying the Palestinian people, Hassassian. They are destroying the Palestinian people. They are finishing them off. What is the point of their recognition when they want to send us to Uganda? What are you talking about?
Don't put the onus on the Palestinian people and don't put the onus on the Palestinian leadership. Put the onus on occupation 75 years. You haven't mentioned anything about, what
You
Israel
are
has been doing
collaborating with that
people,
occupation,
with the
ambassador.
destruction
You
of
are
our
doing
people,
security
to
coordination with
weakening
that
our Palestinian
occupation.
Authority, not allowing them to perform their functions, trying to withdraw and control the tax revenues. You are not talking about all these things that are weakening the Palestinian Authority, but you're talking about persons, Mahmoud Abbas and others, who are considered to be corrupt as far as you are concerned, and you want to reinvent the wheel and bring somebody on parachute to rule over the Palestinian people.
As
What
far
we're
as the
saying,
Palestinian people are
we need
concerned,
new blood.
as far as the
Yes, we need
Palestinian
new
people are
elections.
concerned, as far as the international community is
We
concerned, as far as
reconsider what
everybody
happened
else is
in Gaza, and
Okay.
not to repeat the same mistakes, but don't put the onus on the PLO and on President Abbas.
Gentlemen,
We have also to bear the
let
brunt
me-
and the responsibility.
Okay,
Now,
we are down to just a few minutes, and I need to come back to Gideon one last time. Gideon Levy, I need to ask you the same question that I actually put to Ramzy, but from your side. Ambassador, please, we only have a few minutes left. I'd like to get Gideon Levy, because I'll ask you the same question. Who is waiting? You have said this current government in Israel right now is a complete failure, should be ignored entirely. So tell us there in Israel, who is waiting in the wings? Who is even available to create the kind of dialogue that's necessary for a future without occupation in Palestine? Is it even possible anywhere in Israel?
You want me to answer?
Unfortunately not. No one is there from the potential leadership of Israel. And therefore the call must be to the international community. Stop waiting for Israel to put an end to the occupation, because Israel has no intention to put an end to the occupation.
And is there nothing that can be done from the Palestinian side then that Israel would accept? Is there absolutely nothing? Because international pressure hasn't worked for decades and probably won't going forward.
No, there was never international pressure. There were condemnations, there were talkings. They were never taking any kind of practical measures. Try it once, like you tried it with Russia 2 weeks after the invasion to Ukraine, to Crimea. You have to understand, Israel learned to live with the condemnations and don't call it pressure, because Israel and Israelis don't pay any price for the occupation, are not punished for the occupation, and they have no reason to put an end to it. They will not wake up one shiny morning and say, oh, this occupation is not so nice, let's put an end to it. This will not happen. It will only happen if they will have something to lose for it.
Gideon, that will unfortunately have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd really like to thank all three of my guests so much for being with us. Our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.